Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silver Mont, and this is my review of Wulong Fallen Dynasty, played on PC via Steam. Disclaimer, I received a review key for this product. This game comes to us from the same development team as Nioh, and whilst you might feel some of the Nioh, and thus Dark Souls DNA in here, Wulong is to Shadows Die Twice what Nioh was to Dark Souls. In short, it is an action RPG with an emphasis on action, and this time around the game has been somewhat simplified compared to Nioh, which had a lot of systems and depth to the combat. 3 stances, a dozen weapons, each with their own skill tree, many skills, magic, ninjutsus, yokai shifts, and yokai abilities. Even counters and parries can be given their own category of combat, along with the somewhat in-depth ki or stamina management. Wulong, however, is quite focused on a very specific sort of posture system called Spirit. Effectively, in Wulong, you have a meter that fills up left or right, orange or blue, your spirit gauge. Blocking attacks fills up the orange bar, as does casting magic, taking hits, dodging, and so on. The orange bar being maxed out is a bad thing, as it means the next hit you take will stagger you and leave you open, defenseless. The blue bar, meanwhile, fills up by successfully deflecting enemy strikes, attacking with light attacks, and so on. What happens when your blue bar is full? Well, you can expend all of that blue to power up your heavy attack, or you could use it to shoot out some more magic. It sounds rather complicated when looking at it and trying to explain it, but it's really intuitive when you're playing. Blue bar filled heavy attacks will deal a lot more posture damage to enemies, as will deflecting their unblockable strikes. And it's worth pointing out in Wulong, whilst you can guard, it's not really worth it most of the time. Deflecting can deflect every single attack in the game. So far as I can recall, I don't remember seeing a single attack that couldn't be deflected. Even fire on the ground can somehow be deflected. Your character's just that good. So yes, if you deflect an unblockable red glowing strike, well, that's going to deal a huge amount of posture damage to your enemy. Once you've broken their posture, you can deal a critical attack on them for huge damage. As such, most of your character's damage in boss fights and against strong enemies will come from this. It will do thousands versus the hundreds of your normal. So in a sense, it isn't too important which weapon you used, because the damage of these critical attacks appears to be somewhat normalised between them. But of course, different weapons will still build meters in different ways. Some will build it faster than others. The overall playstyle of Wulong is one that encourages you to be very aggressive and in your face to enemies, alternating between light attacks, deflecting, and strong attacks to overwhelm your opponent. It's, in a way, the complete opposite of Dark Souls 1's style of combat, which was a far more wait-and-see approach. Not saying one is better than the other, you understand, but they are very different, and it means you shouldn't really try and play Wulong like you might Dark Souls. You could say Wulong is closer to Bloodborne's aggression, which was rewarded with the regain system, and of course, Shadows Die Twice. While it is somewhat simplified, as mentioned, compared to Nioh, I think that will only really impact replay value. Whereas builds and playstyles varied greatly in Nioh, there isn't too much variety this time around, rather like Shadows Die Twice once again. Even if you use different tools or weapons, your overall playstyle is likely to be much the same. Speaking of which, Wulong does offer up a variety of weapons to pick from. Swords, dual swords, halberds, dual halberds, spears, slashing spears, hammers, staves, and so on. I must admit, I was sort of mind blown by a game having not just one, but 2 different varieties of spear, considering how overlooked they typically are. And if you're throwing in polearms as well, then you have like halberds and glaives. I mean, it's good to be a polearm enjoyer, I guess. Leveling up your character involves attuning to one of the 5 classical elements: wood, metal, water, earth, and fire. These also work in an expanded rock, paper, scissors style system. Water beats fire, fire beats metal, and so on and so forth. Every 5 levels or so, you will also unlock a magical point for each of the elements, which you can use to unlock the game's various spells. as might be expected. Fire is more about damage, wood is health and lightning, earth is defense based, metal is poison, and water is stealth and ice. To summarize them, each stat has corresponding bonuses. Wood, once again, raises your health, earth is your defense stat. The various weapons also receive scaling bonuses on the elements, usually with 3 of them, so it'll be like maybe A, B, and C, for example, with water, earth, and fire. With the exception of ranged weapons such as bows, which typically only scale with water, although there are some exceptions. However, much like Nioh, it's not like you had to use a katana just because you were focusing on the stat which scaled best with it. It's an added bonus, but not at all required. As with Nioh, you can equip various divine beasts to bolster your stats, and you can also summon them, and you can summon them in 2 different ways. The first way of summoning them just makes them do their signature attack. The second way is a buff for you and any allies, which will just give your weapons the element of that associated divine beast. The game supports co-op with up to 3 players, so you can summon 2 people to help you out. You can also summon NPCs and increase your bond with them, receiving bonuses. Example, if you max out your bond, you will be able to get that character's armor and equipment. You can also have like 1 player summon and 1 NPC summon. And the NPC summons do have a lot of flavor dialogue too. For example, when you start one level, you might have Guan Yu accompanying you, and he will comment on things throughout the level. Whereas if you summon him on an unrelated level, he might not have so much to say. But they do give you a lot of interesting flavor and sort of background information. Speaking of which, I've not mentioned the story yet, have I? Wulong begins in 184 AD, in China, during the final days of the Han Empire. This story is a 3 Kingdoms story, so if you're a fan of that, like yours truly, since I was like 10 years old, you can expect to see many familiar faces, including some you wouldn't expect to see here. In a manner much akin to Nioh, generals will show up to either help or hinder you, sometimes one after the other, whilst taking part in the story, as you see events from your created character's perspective. You are a nameless militia man who gets drawn into this romance of the 3 Kingdoms. As somebody who's really into 3 Kingdoms, I had been waiting for a game like this for quite some time, and I'm enjoying seeing what they're going to do with the setting going forward, as I am a bit disappointed that the game, spoilers, ends around 200 AD, which is like 20 years before the 3 Kingdoms era really starts, but this is all crucial building towards that. So I'm hoping in DLCs, or maybe even a sequel, we're going to go further up to around the 260 AD and so forth. Incidentally, yes, Wei is the best kingdom and Salmonda is the best ruler. If you like the sort of wraparound level design with shortcuts that is present in Nioh and Dark Souls, you will be able to enjoy its presence here too. This is a, what do they call it, a masocore kind of game. If you weren't a fan of Nioh, Wulong might not be for you, but that of course depends on what you disliked or liked about Nioh. If you found it too complex, and to be fair, Nioh does have a lot going on. If I try and go back to Nioh 2 now, it's going to take me a couple of hours to get that muscle memory back, because there were so many systems in that game. So if you found it too complex, Wulong is rather simplified, as mentioned. Conversely, if you really loved the depth of Nioh 2's combat, you might find Wulong a little lacking on that front when it comes to build variety and such. Whilst it retains a similar item system from Nioh, one has to wonder how important it will be in the long term, considering the very basic setup of the game's combat system, effectively relying on posture-breaking enemies. You can apply status effects such as poison, burning, and you can get set bonuses on armors. However, unlike Nioh, you won't get, say, 20 copies of your starting sword, all of which are getting stronger and stronger. Every item starts at level 1, and then you upgrade it yourself, more like Dark Souls 1 in that aspect. However, each item comes in a variety of rarities from 1 star to 5 star, although 5 star only unlocks after the end of the game for sort of, new game plus purposes. So the grinding aspect comes from getting a 5 star or a 4 star version of your weapon, with also the right weapon arts, the martial arts, because every weapon comes with up to 2 martial arts special effects, which are basically weapon arts. You can't change them at the moment, however, so you need to try and get one that has what you want on it. Every weapon also has up to like 4 or 5 bonus abilities, which you can change. You can re-roll those at the blacksmith, and it's very simple and easy to do, which is nice. As for the status effects, well, I'm going to tell you right now that Thunder is kind of one of the best ones. Fire felt like it was the most resisted element. There were so many enemies I was coming across who were straight up immune to fire. So, if you want to know my amateur opinion after about 40 hours playing the game, I would say the best build is Water and Lightning, because not only will those scale with some of the best weapons in my opinion, you get very useful abilities, and well, you can have Water and Lightning. If something resists water, it's not going to resist lightning, and vice versa. Unfortunately, whilst Wulong has been a fun game to play, and my biggest complaints on the gameplay side would be a lack of balance between the various weapon types, slower weapons in particular not feeling nearly as useful as the faster weapons, and some spells just kind of seem bad. So we just need a balance pass on weapons and spells, which is fairly simple to do. So whilst these gameplay issues are fairly small, the technical issues of the game are quite a lot worse. My friends and I had a dozen crashes between the 4 of us, several random disconnects, but more dire are the performance issues. Wulong's performance is all over the place. There are performance and resolution modes, but neither really impacted my frame rate too much. So I'd suggest resolution mode on PC, because the performance mode made the game look ugly, and I didn't get any actual, performance improvements there. See, here's the thing. It's not really about, oh, you know, lower this setting to get a few frames. It's more like you can play the game at 50% resolution with everything on the lowest settings, and you're still going to get frame rate fluctuations randomly, which will work almost exactly the same as they would with the game maxed out. I don't have the technical knowledge to deep dive these performance issues. I don't know what would be causing it, for example, but there is stuttering, inconsistent frame rates, and some strange flashing visual anomalies now and then. The most severe of these would be the frame pacing issues. That makes it really gameplay impacting in a game where 90% of the gameplay is parrying effectively. So they really need to optimize this game. Performance right now is just not good, no matter what settings I put it on. It will always have these weird, sudden dips and stutters. As for, well, how much game is there in this game? I would put Wulong at the 30-hour mark, but of course a game like this is made to be replayed, and it's going to depend on, well, many factors. How many times you get stuck on a boss, for example. And I'll be honest, the only boss that I died more than, like, 3 times to was the first one, because once you get the hang of the game, it's really not a hard game at all. There are 3 DLCs coming, which I imagine will follow the same sort of path as Final Fantasy Chaos, Neo and Neo 2's DLCs, which are all pretty good at improving the base game experience whilst giving some new story content too and wrapping things up. As for the story, well, if you're like me and you know Three Kingdoms, then you know roughly how events are going to play out, although I did enjoy some of the twists that Wulong put on it. If you don't know anything about Three Kingdoms, then honestly, it might be a bit confusing for you, because there are a lot of names, places, and characters thrown at you. You might have trouble telling your Cao Caos from your Kuan Yus, your Bofus from your Yidas, and so on, but I think the game presents the story well enough that you'll be able to keep up with things. The core cast is fairly strong, although they definitely have a lot more room for development. And, well, I suppose this is the time where I say if you do want to know more about Three Kingdoms, check out the Chinese TV show Three Kingdoms from around 2010, if you can find it somewhere. It's really good. The story here in this game, nothing mind-blowing. It's told through cinematics and in-game dialogue, if you don't desummon them or play co-op. It's perfectly serviceable. Game has a Chinese dub, and I would suggest using it, so you can hear the proper pronunciations of the characters, unlike what I've been saying in this review, because even though I've been playing and reading and watching Three Kingdoms stuff for 20 years, I still can't really pronounce them properly, but oh well. Overall, Wulong is definitely a game with a lot of potential, Right now, might be a good idea to wait for a performance patch before picking the game up. On PC, I don't know how it performs on consoles, it's probably a bit better there because that just seems to be the case. These last few months, nobody optimizes PC games. Oh well. Gameplay though, really fun. Whilst it lacks the complexity of Neo's system, it's still very satisfying to land deflex encounters. Until next time though, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon. Ciao.